And then by 83, the rest of the 80s, you had a boom in the markets. The market went down for any reason. Not sure why, but we can see. If we look at 80, yeah, I have a lot of, yeah, so 82, there was unemployment. Let's look at 84. So in 1984, the US economy steamed into its second year of recovery with little perceptible reacceleration in inflation. In the first quarter of 1984, gains in employment production accelerated at near record rates. New auto sales rose to their highest levels since 1979, and housing starts to reach their highest rate since 1978. Indirect evidence of the recovery strength was equally impressive. So auto sales rose immensely since 79. They rose immensely since 78. The economy was growing during this period. You see, this is another example that the market does not reflect the economy. Despite the new auto sales, new booms, market does not care and it can go up and down if it wants to. In this case, it went down. Many people didn't even know why, but that's more of the reason to buy because there's more of a worse reason to come up and buy if the worst has already happened about literally 10 years ago. That's you see how the mentality is here. When the bad thing happens, that's when it's very cost effective and a huge opportunity to get into because it's harder to for something worse to happen. But does that mean that something worse can't happen? No. But the chances of something worse happening, if there's only one thing bad happening, the market can come down, but not as much to the extent in the 70s, right? So out of this whole thing, so by 84, the market barely made a return of 1%. By 85, though, many people probably put in like, the market looks a bit strange. Well, the market kept going up by 86, and look at this gain. Look at this. This is by 86. It went to 1,000. It almost went to $2,000, or really 2,000 points. Do you really think by this point you would care what happened during the stagflation era when the market was trading around $1,000 to $700 when you're now making double of that? See, this is why it does not matter what happens macroeconomically, unless if you're in the Federal Reserve. That does matter if that's your job, if you earn money that way. But if you're investing, macroeconomics is gibberish and only meant to sell you on gibberish. And unfortunately, this is what happens a lot in Wall Street because a lot of smart people like to go to Wall Street because they think Wall Street is like a place where you will earn a lot of money. Moving their profession to Wall Street is a very sad way of wasting their talent. If you're good at physics, you don't want to work in a hedge fund. You want to work at physics. You want to master it. It's super essential. And I'd say that to everyone. You want to do things. If you really like math, and you really like the approach of it, you should become a mathematician. You should become a architect if you like building, right? But you shouldn't be in the markets or working for a hedge fund, which I know a lot of people might be receiving this stuff a bit strangely. Guys, in order to make money, it does not require high amounts of academic practices. It's not that's not true. That's not true at all. In order to make money, you have to see things differently from someone else psychologically. It's a huge psychological game. That means it's temperament. This game, that's why Warren Buffett says that, if you have an IQ of 180 and you're in the markets, just sell 40 of your IQ and you will do fine if you have the right temperament. And that's what it's about. You need to have the right temperament in the market in order to excel because you need to do things that many people aren't to. So you need to be a natural contrarian, really. That's just straight up from what it is. If you want to do well in the markets, you need to be a contrarian, doing different from what other people are doing, and many people are not going to be doing that, right? And I think that's perfectly fine, and that's why in this course I'm gonna give you a wide amount of options of what you can do, because I know a lot of people. That's my point that I'm trying to say. Like, if you're good at physics, you should be focusing at physics. You shouldn't be in hedge funds. But if you want to make money still in physics, that's perfectly fine. Having money is listen. I'm in finance. I've been in many years. And money is a super important thing you need to have in life because you don't know what's going to happen. It's not for the rainy day. It is for the rainy day, but it's most of all for your health and what you want to do. I see so many cases where people were doing so well at a field and they got laid off and the world kind of tear it apart. And now they're working in a field that they don't want to. And that's terrible. So that's why I believe that personal finance is super important because if you're able to create a flow of income on the side by like a cash flow that's giving you a higher return in the long term every 8 to 10 years, you're not going to be able to worry to think that what am I going to do when I'm 80 or 90 when I don't have the capacity or physical capacity or whatever the profession is to keep doing it at the age that I am. And that's why I believe that the market's the best thing to do that. Because if you invest in the S&P 500, you're a relatively young person, my age, or 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old. It's much better to invest your money, even if you're an elderly person, than leaving it in the bank account. I'm telling you right up front, because of the depreciation. It's much better. And if you want to keep doing what you want to do, whether you're an architect or physics or I don't know, running your own business per se, you definitely have to, it's definitely helpful to become an investor, no matter what profession you're doing. If you're in law, if you're whatever, it's important to keep your money in something that accumulates in a return as time passes by and that overbeats inflation. And I would say that's why I'm giving these options, that if you find it super hard for you to get out of the crowd and to still have this emotional attachment towards the market, listen, the best thing that you could do is just invest in the S&P 500 and don't listen to anyone else. Don't listen to anything about finance. Don't say that anything. Look at the stock market. Look at the S&P 500. Most of all, the S&P 500, if not the Dow Jones. Look at them both as a bank account or a savings account. In a savings account, you want to hold it for your future. Look at it as a 401k. I definitely recommend you to invest in a very solid index fund, right? Because you can't invest in the index, because the index is a simulation of what the economies of these companies are doing. But an index fund tracks the same amount of assets that an index has, only that it's a fund. People are able to invest in the return that these companies can make, so that this index fund gets to utilize the fund and actually invest in those companies, right? Because what the index does is that it tracks the assets, it tracks, but it doesn't invest in them. It tracks the assets balances and sees how it can return in the future. So in order to really make a good return for the index, you need to invest either in an index fund or an ETF. And I'll talk about that in a different video where I'm going to talk about it in wide depth so you guys can know which one's your best option. But those are the ways how you can invest in the market. And believe me, look, a lot of people maybe watching this won't have, let's say, it's going to be very hard for you to disconnect from everyone else. And that's perfectly fine. You know, there's no shame in here. It doesn't matter. If you can't control it, it's fine. And you have to work with what you get. I know how that's like. It definitely does not mean that you should stop investing in the stock market. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. And it's super sad because they miss the return, the huge return that they would have made 10 to 20 years, and that will always happen. And so they have like some sort of resentment. And I don't want you to become these people. So if you can't do this stuff where you can't correspond differently towards what the crowd is doing, I'd recommend to just invest in an index and only to just see it as money that you won't need, that you won't take away. And I really want you to see it like that. The best approach is, I'll talk about that, but I'm going to generalize it. The best approach is to grab a percentage of your income that you receive and just invest it every month or a set period of months for a year, and do that for the rest of your life. Why? Because by the time you look back at that index fund, by the time you're older, let's say 80 years old per se, or 70, you're going to have for sure more than $100 million, depending how much you're investing. But I would say $100 million. Of course, it depends how long ago you invested into it. But if you left it for 70 years, yeah, you would have about $100 million, $80 million. That's way better than any IRA, any 401k. And I think a lot of you might be on board in that. So you're going to be a lot far off than a lot of funds that you can get, a lot of the gibberish Wall Street sells you. So, and again, this isn't my opinion or anything like that. I showed you in the Google Sheets that if you invested in the S&P 500 since 1928, and now it's in 2022, almost 100 years, you would have about $3.1 million with $10,000. So imagine if you did $1 million in 10 years. That's an average about $100,000. Or 20 years, that would be like $50,000 per year. So 50,000. Okay, so you would have 5 times of this. More than that, because of compound interest, right? Compound interest plays a big role. You would have for sure. That's why that's why I'm telling you. Like, it's not my opinion. And also counting with inflation, I can say without a doubt that you would have more than $100 million by the time you're elderly, and you could definitely retire with that money if that's your goal. I love this because, I mean, money runs the world, guys. It's definitely incredible when you have that sort of money, because you're able to enjoy what you have. Most of all, it's not about that money that makes you exactly happy, but you're able to do the things, you're able to not worry about money problems. You're able to actually use them as opportunities, as good problems. If you want to run your own corporation, so that's what I want to do. It definitely gives you the freedom, and you don't have to be working at a job anymore when you're elderly. And it's sad to see that, but if you're like that, there's always a time to do it now, and it's never late. Even if you're an elderly person, It's better to invest your money into this, is you will have a higher return than the inflation, than just holding cash. Now, by 1985, this was the boom of the 80s. Then by 1986, there was a high budget deficit to reduce the Lovre Accord, which put the nail in the coffin on Japan. Oh, okay, all right. So, see, there's a lot of things. This is what's cool about the market, and this is why I'm saying, like, think about it. If you let's say in 1956, you invested in an index fund, and look, you didn't even know the next year there was a Suez Canal crisis, there was a Kennedy slide, a Cuban Missile Crisis, JF Kennedy got assassinated, the Vietnam War, the inflation, Britain was ended. There was a huge suffering, oil crisis, the biggest inflation ever in human history. And most of all, interest rates went up higher than ever before. Global inflation, a hawkish view, and all of these sorts of things. The U.S. Korean War, all these things. If you bought at 1956 and you kept buying and you kept using it as a savings account, if we look at since 1976, what was it at 1956? What's the price at now? 19,000. So 19,000 by, I think it's by 86. So that's about 30 years. You made about, a lot of this stuff got affected by real estate too, with stagflation. And I remember real estate boomed in the 80s too, right? Because of inflation. Real estate is also cyclical in ways, because when there's higher interest rates, there's going to be less amount of loans for mortgages. People are going to have a harder way to refinance because of interest rates. And so that affects the amount of spending and utilization, which will affect someone else's earnings. And so that's why I believe that despite the market going down or whatever, I think the same thing was happening with real estate, because it affects it too. It was 1960 by 460. You made about 426% gain since 56. See? And look at all the problems that happen. That's why I'm telling you that in really bad problems, you basically invested when the baby boom started, and you still have the money when there was consequences from the baby boom, and net out of in total, and plus you're making actually more, because that's just the price by buy and sell. If you sell, which I really do not advise you to sell anytime. Why? Because companies will make more and more money than you think they will. Trust me, I know that's hard for people to understand, but you have to understand that I don't know about in 100 years, but I know as of today that the market's always going to go up higher and higher and higher, not because I think or whatever. No, because companies by nature, by economically in the country that we live in, are inevitably going to make more money as time goes on. New people are being born. People are more digitalized. People are consuming more than what they can, even though people think that they aren't sometimes, but they are, because look at what happened in COVID. People thought that people wouldn't consume more than COVID because people wouldn't go outside, but they were completely wrong. Why? Because people were incentivized to consume more in the digital media. That net in total, people actually made more money than they ever did when people were buying in physical. See, so that's why no matter what will happen, even though how crazy it sounds, markets will always go up higher, because the assets of these companies are going to increase and increase and go up higher. And that's going to go, and also their operations and their clients buying more and paying more from better products, and so that business will be able to spend in better inventory, better product value, and so that value is going to reflect the customer's attachment with the product, and so that they want to consume more and more and more and more, and where the company can make more and more and more profits. And when the company makes more and more profits, the stock's going to go up. Right? Now, does that mean that the stock always goes up when the profits go up? No, that's what happened last year. Markets go up because of all the factors. Markets go up and down in the short term, from geopolitically, from anticipation of economically, from pandemic, from anything. But in the long term, does the pandemic affect what the markets will be in 10 years? Well, it does play into effect, but it doesn't mean that it's going to play a full effect. It's just a little effect. Is the pandemic really going to affect how people make money in 10 to 20 years? Not in how, but is it going to reduce the amount of money they're going to make? No, they're not. Because people will still consume in some way. You can't restrict someone from consuming. People want to have a better life. People don't want to, I want to spend less more, I want to earn less. No, everyone wants to have a better life. Everyone has technology. Everyone wants to buy a car. Everyone wants to buy a house. Everyone wants to travel. See, it's this consumption. People want to consume and consume more. People want to live more comfortably. People want to have more computers, more food. People like that. People want to get into more relationships, which is going to affect the consuming into romantic items like chocolates and all this stuff. See, it's a business aspect. Everything is a business. This is why the market's going to continue to keep going up and up and up and up. And that's why you need to dislink from yourself from the crowd. But again, that's what I'm saying. If you can't do this, just invest in the index. And I'm telling you, it's going to be the best investment you ever did. And you're going to agree with me. Because like that famous saying that I learned from Charlie, you are smart and I'm right.